Hello everybody, and welcome back to our series that explores every single tool in the myCADtools suite. Last week we started to explore the Project Manager in part 1 of this 2-part episode. So this week we're going to pick up right where we left off and move on to our Rename tab. So this whole section is saying once these components are duplicated, you have the option to rename the components based on a specific set of rules that you set. And to set the rules, we can just add a rule. You can replace the first characters with an entire set of new characters. Let's just say RA for robot arm. Now the numbers of characters to replace, if you have a specific prefix that occurs on multiple components, let's say it's just a 2-letter prefix, you can bump up this number here to 2 and replace the first 2 letters with the new field. If you just leave it at 0, it adds the 2 letters in front of every single component name. So it's not replacing, it's just adding. Similarly, you can replace the last characters, and by selecting 0, it adds whatever you add in this new field directly to the end of each component name. If you bump it up by a few numbers, then this means it'll replace the last 2 characters of every single component that you select with whatever you put in the new field. Let's just put the number 1 and leave it at 0, so it just adds instead of replaces. You can also replace a string of characters. Let's say that a string of characters shows up in your component names. Just type in the field to replace, and you can add in the new field. We'll just shorten it. And then the word assembly would be replaced with the shortened version. Next, we have the delete characters option, and this is just to delete characters out of the name of those components. Type in whichever characters you'd like deleted, and they will disappear. You can truncate characters, meaning shorten the names of your components, and if you want to keep those component names to a specific amount of characters, then you can do that here by just bumping it up to however many characters you'd like to shorten it to. Let's keep this one and move down to condition. Again, we have a few conditions here. We have always selected as default, but you can also select a toolbox component or a part, assembly, or drawing document. You can also set rules based on properties. This way, this document property will then become the condition of the rule. And you can create a condition based on the location of the document or based on the document name and just punch that in there. We're just going to go ahead and leave it as always. Deselect that, click apply, and that rule shows up. When we hit apply the rules, all of the components that adhere to this criteria show up in this orangish color. And that's letting you know that once the duplication is complete, these are the components that will be affected by this rule. And as you might have guessed, we have the suppress and modify here. Suppress gets rid of it, but before we do that, let's modify it, and then you can just go in and change any of these that you would like. And then suppress gets rid of it. But even though that rule is suppressed, we've still applied it to all of these components here. So we're going to have to reset all in order to make sure that that rule doesn't get applied. We also have this rename component based on initial location. This is if we want to rename individual components. We can just select it, see our initial name shows up and final name, and we can change that to chamfer2. And when we click modify, you can see that that chamfer shows up in blue this time, indicating that it will be changed when we do duplicate this assembly. Again, if we don't want that change to stick, just click reset, and our chamfer1 returns to its black state. I'm just going to go ahead and add that rule back in, replacing the string of characters, and apply that, apply these rules. That way that change should show up when we do duplicate this assembly. So next we have properties. We can add properties and then select the property from the drop-down that we'd like, type in the value, and change the condition if we would like from always to is part, is assembly, drawing, toolbox, fastener, is a part, or an assembly. These are all options here under properties. Right now it's set to always. Let's add one more property, material. Just type in ABS. And if we want to get rid of one of these properties, we can just highlight it and suppress it. Similarly, if there are properties that you would like to suppress that show up in this original assembly that you wouldn't like to translate across, then you can just go ahead and do the same, find that property, and upon duplication, that property will not show up. There's a lot of similar functionality to the batch properties tool in the myCADtools suite right here on this tab. So next we have structure, and this is where we get into the nitty-gritty of duplication. So in order to duplicate this, we're going to have to add a location. And to do that, we just browse. Let's go ahead and browse to the myCADtools folder here, and I'll add a folder called Project Manager. So now we've added our destination location, brand new folder called Project Manager. If our project contains subfolders, we can add the same subfolders. Again, we have some conditions. Right now, always means that everything's going to translate across. But you can set a condition for a non-SolidWorks document or a toolbox document, part, assembly, drawing document, very similar to the conditions that we saw earlier. I'm just going to leave it as always. But again, you can set that condition to a property or a date or a file location or even a file size. Okay, so I'm going to click Apply, and that location is added to our destination location. Right below that, we have our project operation, and right now it's set to duplicate, which is default, or we can create a zip file and send that zip file to a specific folder. I'm just going to go ahead and leave it as duplicate. But before I move on, we do have the same suppress and modify controls. If we do want to modify that location, we can do that. That's an option. Or we can suppress it altogether and just get rid of it. We can add multiple locations. Let's say that we want it saved in a separate folder as well. We could add a specific folder, click Apply, and then that project will be copied into 2 separate locations. Alright, and finally, we have our duplication tab, and this just basically gives you a rundown of everything that we did in the setup. We have 22 parts, 1 assembly, 1 drawing, 0 documents, and 12 folders. We get one last chance to change any of this information here. We can reset it, but if we did everything correct, we should be good to go. So let's just cruise down and execute the process. We'll hit Process and Preview of Copies. This is showing us that we have original files and final files and the origination and where those files will end up. Right now we're set to copied files. You can see our color is set to yellow. If we have any files that aren't being copied and just moved, it would be set to blue. Files that are only modified are this salmon color here, and files not modified would be highlighted with just white. But since we're copying every single one of these files, we're just going to click Apply, and the tool will go through and copy that assembly over to the location that we specified. So let's go ahead and check that out. Here our Project Manager folder. If we open up that assembly, it opens it up in SolidWorks. And we have 2 identical SolidWorks assemblies. So that's a really quick overview of the Project Manager tool in the myCADtools suite. Like I said, there's an awful lot of functionality in this one singular tool, so I didn't want to take up too much of your time. However, that gives you the basic idea about how to navigate through the Project Manager in order to get your files duplicated while maintaining all of the dependencies. So again, this is a great way to create a nice secure backup, or if you want to start another project from a basis of a previous file that you've been working on before, then this is the best way to accomplish that task. So thanks for watching. I hope it's been helpful. If you do have any questions, please feel free to email us at solidworksupport@mlc-cad.com, and we'll see you next time.